Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co-directors of the Notebooks Collective. Founded in 2021, we are a virtual literary art space focused on community, connection, and continued learning. We are so excited to welcome Gabby and Sasha here tonight. In our next in conversation will feature poets Octavio Quintanilla and Catherine D. Old-Mixon. Please check out our website, or even better, sign up for our newsletter to learn more. Rebecca will put links to that in the chat. The Notebooks Collective believes that Black Lives Matter and that we have a responsibility to undo harm and at the same time uplift joy. We acknowledge that as a virtual organization, our offices are on the lands of the Kickapoo, Nipmunk, Agawam, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket tribes. Native peoples across the world continue to preserve and celebrate their cultures, and we encourage you to support Native writers and artists. As we do this land acknowledgement, we want to recognize those who are suffering from conquest and terror across the globe and in our own country. We emphatically say, ICE out. We know these are extremely stressful times, and we are glad you have joined us tonight to be together. I now welcome Rebecca to introduce our presenters.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca. My pronouns are she, her, and I am so excited to do this introduction. Okay. When I first started studying poetry, really studying it, I began with a poetry handbook by Mary Oliver. With encouragement and humor, she teaches all the technical tools a poet could need, and then ends with this quote: "Writers must simply take care of the sensibility that houses the possibility of poems. There is nourishment in books, other art, history, philosophies, in holiness and mirth. It is an honest, hands-on labor also. I don't mean to indicate a preference for the scholarly life. And it is in the green world, among people and animals, and trees for that matter, if one genuinely cares about trees. A mind that is lively and inquiring, compassionate, curious, angry, full of music, full of feeling, is a mind full of possible poetry. Poetry is a life cherishing force." This passage illuminates how poetry is a bodily art, how there is something vital in what we observe, translate, and create. And when I started to study poetry, I also read Gabby's Rocket Fantastic, and I fell in love with the breadth and the potency of their poems. And so tonight I'm thinking of that life cherishing force and the lineage of poets before me, of what it takes to nourish ourselves in a time when our attention is always threatened, when we can so easily be exhausted by what the world does. When Lisa and I created this project, it was to serve to create a place where poets and writers could share their work, a space of love and attention where we could continue that work of nourishment. And so, how fitting is it that with Gabby's new book, New Economy, they have taken their words on the road through potlucks with community. And while we don't have food here tonight, we have the nourishment of Mary Oliver, of Sasha's new film, of Gabby's poems. And so I am so excited to break bread with all of you, and there are so many of you tonight, to learn and to be fed the work that we do. Lisa and I are so grateful for Gabby and Sasha's time, and so we will get to the program right after I do the official bio portion. So Gabrielle Calvocoressi is the author of The Last Time I Saw Amelia Earhart, Apocalyptic Swing, a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize, and Rocket Fantastic, winner of the Audre Lorde Award for Lesbian Poetry. Calvocoressi is the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including a Stegner Fellowship, Jones Lectureship from Stanford University, a Rona Jaffe Women's Writers Award, and a Lannan Foundation residency in Marfa, Texas, the Bernard F. Connors Prize from the Paris Review, and a residency from the Civitella di Raniera Foundation, among others. Calvocoressi's poems have been published or are forthcoming in numerous magazines and journals, including The Baffler, The New York Times, Poetry, Boston Review, Kenyon Review, Tin House, and The New Yorker. Calvocoressi is the editor-at-large at Los Angeles Review of Books and poetry editor at Southern Cultures. Works in progress include a nonfiction book entitled The Year I Didn't Kill Myself and a novel, The Alderman of the Graveyard. Calvocoressi was the Beatrice Shepard Blaine Fellow at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute from 2022 to 2023. Calvocoressi teaches at UNC Chapel Hill and lives in Old East Durham, North Carolina, where joy, compassion, and social justice are at the center of their personal and poetic practice. Their new collection of poetry, The New Economy, was a finalist for the 2025 National Book Award in Poetry. And Sasha Waters' latest film, Mary Oliver, Saved by the Beauty of the World, is the first documentary portrait of the beloved American poet. The film shares never before seen personal photos, notebooks, and correspondence from her archive, as well as readings by Helena Bonham Carter, Steve Buscemi, Stephen Colbert, Lucy Dacus, Josh Hamilton, John Waters, Jesse Wells, and Oprah Winfrey, and interviews with former U.S. poet laureate Ada Limon, writer and MacArthur Fellow Jason Reynolds, Mary's old friend Maria Shriver, and many more. Saved by the Beauty of the World can be seen at film festivals and on the PBS series American Masters later this year. She has received support from the Catapult Film Fund, Field of Vision, the Film Video Studio at the Wexner, the Denver Film Society, the NEA, the NEH, the Jerome Foundation, and more. Her first film, Whipped, a portrait of three dominatrixes in 1990s New York, was funded in part by Sub Pop Records, selected for the first ever Sundance Producers Conference, and aired nationally on the Sundance Channel. Her next film, Raising Appalachia, was the first ever feature documentary about the devastations wrought by mountaintop strip mining and aired nationally on Independent Lens. She's been a fellow in residence at MacDowell, Yaddo, Malay Arts, and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. A professor of film and art foundation at VCU Arts in Richmond, Sasha is included in Edited by Women Film Editors, a survey of women who invented, developed, fine-tuned, and revolutionized the art of film editing, and in the FemX Film Archive, an ongoing collective archive of interviews with feminist experimental filmmakers. And so now it is my pleasure to welcome Gabby and Sasha to the screen.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, thank you so much.
Hey, Sasha, are we going to go to the movies?
Yeah, let's start off by going to the movies. I think that's how we should start.
Get your popcorn, everyone.
Get your popcorn. I think one thing I'm going to do really quick, because someone in the chat asked if you have to wait until summer to see the film. And for the most part, the answer to that question is yes. The air date on PBS has finally been released. So the American Masters broadcast date is August 25th. But at this website is where I update upcoming screenings. So the film is screening at film festivals. So film festivals through sort of the end of this month and into May. There are some in June that I can't announce yet, but those will be updated. And we're working on a limited theatrical release, maybe 10 or 15 cities in July. I can't announce more than that right now. So it's coming. And so for now, we're just going to start with just watching the first 8 minutes to just get us into the groove, and we're going to hope that I can get this to work. Okay. Oh, wait.
One of the things that I was so excited about is when the Notebooks Collective asked me, they said, Gabby, would you do this, would you do an evening with us? I was so excited and honored to be asked. I couldn't even wait. And I knew immediately who I wanted to do this with. And because I've been going all over the place reading poems and talking about Mary Oliver, and I just thought, like, how cool would it be for us to talk about Mary, talk about poems, listen to some poems, and also see this incredible piece of art that's being made, this really, really beautiful and also very important documentary that I think kind of welcomes Mary back into our lives. She's always been there, but I think there's a sort of Renaissance moment going on that maybe we can talk about. There's going to be a biography coming out. So this is also a great opportunity for us, those of us who've loved Mary, those of us who are getting to know Mary for the first time or again, to just I'm so excited, Sasha. Sorry to interrupt, but as you
I got it. No, I got it working. Yeah. So are we ready? So this is the, like I said, the opening 8 minutes of the film, and I think, one of the things that was such a wonderful discovery for me in making this film was the extent to which Mary's life, her early life in particular, which there's not a lot of information about, it really is like a fairy tale, in good ways and bad, right? That she has this troubled childhood and she leaves it and finds solace in the woods and in books and forging this very independent path. So this is the beginning of that story.
I send this poem to my children the first day of summer every year.
The summer day.
I don't know if I can read this. It's not going to get better later. The summer day. Who made the world?
Roses late summer. What happens to the leaves after they turn red and golden and fall away? What happens to the singing birds when they can't sing any longer? What happens to their quick wings? Do you think there is any personal heaven for any of us? Do you think anyone, the other side of that darkness, will call to us, meaning us?
Maybe. Sweet Jesus, talking his melancholy madness, stood up in the boat, and the sea lay down, silky and sorry. So everybody was saved that night. But you know how it is when something different crosses the threshold. The uncles mutter together, the women walk away, the young brother begins to sharpen his knife. Nobody knows what the soul is.
Beyond the trees, the foxes keep teaching their children to live in the valley. So they never seem to vanish. They are always there in the blossom of light that stands up every morning in the dark sky.
She was a brilliant poet from the beatnik years. I think she was always a beatnik.
Mary Oliver's poems are, for me, a balm in the storm. They speak the language of my soul, and I think multiple souls around the earth.
I wouldn't mind being a rose in a field full of roses. Fear has not yet occurred to them, nor ambition. Reason they have not yet thought of. Neither do they ask how long they must be roses and then what, or any other foolish question.
She was our most famous poet for a long time, very famous, and yet completely elusive.
I think of her as a mystic.
She's radical. What do you think you have done with your one wild and precious life?
What I have done is learn to love and learn to be loved. And that didn't come easy.
Ohio, where I grew up, was important to me. It being the initial place where I learned to love the earth.
The two things I loved from a very early age were the natural world and dead poets. I was a kind of solitary kid, and dead poets were my friends.
America, center of equal daughters, equal sons.
I have a kind of joke answer to who do I read, but I mean it. I read Whitman.
Strong, ample, fair.
And Whitman.
Enduring, capable, wit.
And Whitman.
Perennial with the earth.
Walt Whitman created this new voice that was riding on the waves of American speech.
Mary Oliver was one of the first poets that pointed to Whitman as an important influence. The tumbling down the page of those long, lush sentences became part of her education.
I started writing probably when I was about 13. I saw some poems I liked and I was trying to imitate them. You don't think at 13 about career or profession or stuff like that. I just started doing it.
It was shocking.
I was a girl in Ohio, and I wanted to write poems. Unheard of. Even boys didn't do that.
Just to be a poet in America is already clear enough. It's hard to grow up feeling invisible, feeling that you don't fit in the culture around you, and come out of that with a strong sense of self.
I felt different. I went to school because I had to. The only record I had broken in high school was truancy.
When you say you felt different, how did different feel to you?
Not belonging. I had 2 or 3 very good friends during that time, but I was always trying to get them to go to the woods. I very much wished not to be noticed and to be left alone.
The world is a cruel and violent place. It's in country songs, it's in ancient songs. A poem is a wayfaring stranger, and it's moving through a world of woe.
My mother was the blue wisteria. My mother was the mossy stream out behind the house. My mother, alas, alas, did not always love her life. Heavier than iron it was, as she carried it in her arms from room to room, oh, unforgettable. I bury her in a box in the earth and turn away.
It was a very dark and broken house that I came from. I escaped it, barely. That was my strength. But I wasn't all strength.
My father was a demon of frustrated dreams, was a breaker of trust, was a poor thin boy with bad luck. He followed God, there being no one else he could talk to. He swaggered before God, there being no one else who would listen. Listen, this was his life. I bury it in the earth. I sweep the closets. I leave the house.
When she was 17, she left that house and she hid out in the woods for a week.
I mention them now. I will not mention them again. It is not lack of love nor lack of sorrow, but the iron thing they carried, I will not carry. I give them 1, 2, 3, 4, the kiss of courtesy, of sweet thanks, of anger, of good luck in the deep earth. May they sleep well, may they soften, but I will not give them the kiss of complicity. I will not give them the responsibility for my life.
Sorry, I was muted. That's a good place to stop. How do I stop sharing? Did I stop sharing?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm back. So I think that's a good place to stop. And I don't know. Gabby, do you want to talk? Do you have a question?
Yeah.
We're
gonna watch more of these.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna watch some more clips, and but yeah, I mean, first of all, it's so exciting to get to see this and to get to look at this. And I thought maybe an interesting thing just to start with, maybe for both of us, but I think it's great to start with you, is why Mary Oliver for you? Especially, like, it's interesting, right? Where we end up all meeting Mary. She's someone I think we keep re-meeting in our lives. Also, you know, thinking about the topics of your other films, one of the readings of Mary that often isn't given is the profoundly queer reading of Mary, which I think is one of the things your film really does, really almost for the first time. And so I just wonder, like, where do you meet Mary? Tell us about you and Mary.
You know, I first meet Mary, I think the way a lot of people maybe meet Mary or meet poetry in general, which is a long time ago, I don't know, I mean, it lasted many years. The Garrison Keillor Writer's Almanac was how I first became introduced to so many poems and poets. And so the poem When Death Comes, I mean, that's part of the reason I have that Garrison Keillor intro to it, which my co-editor Megan, who's younger than I am, she didn't like it. She thought it was so stuffy sounding. I said, no, for people like in my time cohort, like it's a very specific kind of way that we found poetry. If we were, and through other people as well, through classes and teachers and people recommending poets. But I think I found Mary through that, and then also through later through Upstream. Those essays are really, really important to me. And so in terms of making a film about a poet, it was a daunting challenge because my most recently completed film was a film about a photographer who had epic amounts of work, visual. He left behind an archive of nearly 500,000 photographs. And so there was a lot to look at as a base, and then a story to craft around that. And it was sort of the opposite with Mary. The challenge was trying to think about how to tell her story and use the poems and create a kind of visual world that was metaphoric, that didn't compete with the poems, but also didn't try, to just do this on the nose kind of illustration, which sometimes it does. I think it's a little inevitable. Might be some of those points where things are being illustrated. But I think I was really interested in just the challenge of that. And one other thing I'll say is that one thing Megan and I talked about a lot is thinking about the movie musical, and like how in the movie musical songs, like musical numbers function, like they both stop the action of the plot, but advance the story through whatever the content of the musical number is. So we tried to think about the poems in that way, that we're pausing to listen to a poem, and it's sort of separate from the narrative arc, but it's deliberately, it's placed in a very deliberate
you going that way?
place.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. You walk.
Oh, wait, hearing someone. Oh, so so thinking about where the poems are placed in the film, they're not used chronologically because we're trying to think about them from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I see people doing this, and I think this would be so cool. If everyone wants to put in the chat, like, how they met Mary, or where they came to Mary, or where Mary meets them now, that would be so cool. Like, because we're all making this thing together right now. Absolutely. No, I love what you're saying about this. And particularly, it's interesting thinking about this film comes out, within the year or a little bit after the Andrea Gibson documentary. And so we have these two documentaries about these really iconic figures who really save people's lives in lots of ways. I have a lot of questions about if poetry can save lives, but I think both of those are poets who, and I think really, like, if there's one poet who one could say, there's a lot of people who talk about being sort of the heir to Mary Oliver. Like, Andrea Gibson is someone who, in a kind of way, I think really there is that kind of relationship that people have to that work. It's fascinating how sort of the idea of music, the idea of audience, the way that plays in both of these documentaries, and yet they're so different, which is one of the really powerful things that I love. Is like people are also going to see two really different ways of making art, two totally brilliant films, and also films in which the idea of the kind of melody and harmony of a life and poems is really beautifully wrought.
Well, I think Mary too, Mary's a very private person. There's very little video of her. There's some audio that we were able to find. But I think, and the film tries to respect that privacy and think about those limits. In my fantasy 6-hour Netflix version, we could follow all kinds of other paths where we would, spend 45 minutes just looking at Millet, and then Rilke might come in, and we'd have all these other ways that we could branch out her story in connection with her generation, and then also with the generation that follows. But I think within the kind of structure of the 90-minute biography, it's a little bit more contained. But I'm curious to know from you, Gabby, what was the first Mary Oliver poem that you remember discovering?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's the first poem. I mean, I think about Mary Oliver. I really, really came to those poems for the first time when I was in high school. And then when I moved into college and the sort of really iconic Selected Poems comes out, right? The green cover, Mary on the back looking like so handsome. I mean, just like crazy handsome. And it's interesting, like you were talking about Upstream, which is also a book that I love. And I don't know, it's not a book that everybody has read. If you have not read Upstream, like the book of Mary Oliver's essays, I think it's one of her most like remarkable books, and it's very important. And there's this incredible quote in the essay "Staying Alive," which is really important, has become very important to me, and also gets to this idea of that photo and sort of where I was at the time in my life when I kind of really met her, or maybe she met me, and I also kind of was meeting myself. This is from the essay Staying Alive. And there is the thing that one does, the needle one plies, the work, and within that work a chance to take thoughts that are hot and formless, and to place them slowly and with meticulous effort into some shapely, heat-retaining form, even as the gods or nature or the soundless wheels of time have made forms all across the soft, curved universe. You feel the soft belly, the soft animal. That is to say, having chosen to claim my life, I have made for myself, out of work and love, a handsome life. I love that. I love that. I spoke about that sort of quote and that idea of the handsome life at Smith, and I've been doing these talks all over. But, I met Mary Oliver sitting on the rocks outside, like down the street from my grandparents' home, sitting on the Connecticut River, reading those selected poems. Dogfish was actually one of the first poems that like really meant something to me. And part of that has to do with the fact that in that poem, like she says things like, you don't want to hear the story of my life, and I don't want to tell it. I just want to listen to the vast waterfall. There was a kind of deep reticence and also profound like generosity, which I think is one of the great balances of Mary. I think a lot like Dickinson, we do a real disservice to think of her as someone like she may have been very private, but that's not the same thing as like not having friends, like right. It's not. And I think that that's really important because one of the things that I loved is when I gave that talk at Smith, and I was talking about like handsome Mary Oliver, and John Waters talks about this in the film too, right? Like there are those of us who are just like, she was just like this gorgeous, like, butch, like beautiful, and also like very active in her community. The one thing that was amazing about, there were many things that were amazing about doing this talk at Smith, but one was like there were a lot of younger people who came up to me and had not really read Mary Oliver and couldn't believe it, like saw this photo and were just like, oh my gosh, like this is a queer elder. But then there were all these older lesbians, like in not like with their leather jackets and their jeans and the whole things, and they would come up to me and they would after the reading they said, let me tell you about Mary Oliver. And it was just because she was like right, all these people from Provincetown who had been very much a part of a social life that she and Molly, I think, did have, or even if those were smaller groups of connection. I think that it is also something that your film does that's important, that talks about like Mary was someone in community. Mary was someone who had like a kind of relationship and a way in which that relationship functioned with people. It's amazing to watch in this film what a huge character John Waters is in it, and like what a big part of her life is. So I first met Mary Oliver when I was figuring out what kind of young queer person I was. And I was also really reckoning with my mother's suicide for the first time. I was really, It's funny. I wrote this poem in my book. I'm going to read this one poem because it's yeah.
I know which one.
It's just the facts. Practice Sunday night. I'm nervous to give the talk about Mary Oliver. It was just supposed to be a lunch, but now it's in an auditorium and there's live streaming. I don't even know how to talk about queerness anymore. So how did I get in this mess of talking about it in relation to Mary Oliver? What if for 45 minutes I talk about the waterfall and sitting on the rocks by the river beside my mother's first house, reading her Greens Selected next to the house where my mother lived before she met my father, before she had me. There's a picture of her the day she bought the house with her first husband. She's peering in the window. A black cat is walking past. I don't want to talk about my mother in poems anymore. It's like that poem Dogfish says, except I'm the one who doesn't want to hear about it. Is that the truth? Next door, the new neighbors are spending their second night here. I think we'll plant a wall of rosemary between us. The soft animal, something, something, loves what it loves.
That's a beautiful poem.
Thank you.
I love the black cat. You know, I just attach to that image so much. It's such a beautiful image, and then it comes back as the soft animal.
Wait, and there's a real
so
photo.
Maybe less of a threat.
Should I go run and take the photo off the wall and show everyone the photo of the black cat walking past my mother?
I do want to see the photo. I do want to see the
hold,
photo.
Please, keep talking.
Hold the phone. I'll just keep talking. Let's see.
Tell us more about this film.
Okay, wait. Oh, I will. I'm just looking. Oh, I just love how people are writing in the chat that they read English class in community college.
Can you see everyone?
Meeting Mary. Oh wait, you know what? It's a little. Wait, it's okay. It's like there's a little reflection. It's like my reflection is in it. Hold it up. Oh yeah. I can see. I can see the cat's right there in the center of the photo.
Yeah, so this is actually where I met Mary Oliver. I've never really shown this photo to many people. This is, the woman in this photo is my mother. This photo is taken before she meets my father. She's moved in, she's a young woman. She has yet to be hospitalized. Her life is in front of her. She's moved down the street from my grandparents with her first husband. And this is the day she and her first husband, who was a photographer and an architect, went to look at this old house. And she's looking in the door. My grandparents' house would have been up here. The rocks where I read Mary Oliver for the first time were actually on this property. It goes down to the river, and I used to creep over there and read. And this is, I think, always wild. She has no idea I'm coming yet. She has no idea what's happening, but there's this black cat that's about to cross.
It's incredible, that photo. And, it makes me think about, the fact that Mary's a poet and Molly's a photographer, and this relationship between photography and poetry. I mean, I said my last completed feature film was about a photographer, and I think there is this way in which photography and poetry are so similar, right? In that representational photography, let's say, not all photography is representational, but lens-based representational photography is finding objects, events, situations, humans, animals in the world, and putting them together in a way that is, the best photographs really do function metaphorically, like that beautiful photo you just showed us, right? So there's this relationship between the concrete and the transformation into metaphor that I think is so deep in between photography and poetry.
I agree, and I also think, one of the things we don't, I think, talk enough about in Mary Oliver's poems, and it's one of the reasons I think they're often, I don't want to say misread, because I don't really love this idea of misreading poems. I think we meet poems where they meet us, but sometimes I think we don't talk quite enough about perspective in Mary's poems, and also shadow. You know, I mean, like the summer day is amazing for that. That like grasshopper is terrifying. Like there's a lot of moments in the poems where yes, there are these sort of shimmering things on the surface, but there's tremendous shadow. There's tremendous kind of depth between, if this makes sense, like objects, the way the light functions in these. I wonder sometimes if she gets that also from Molly and sort of living with Molly, because that to me is so much of the unspoken that comes in the poems. Like people say things like, well, Mary really doesn't write about family, but to me, like Wild Geese is very much like there's so many poems you can look at and think there's a lot of the personal story in here. It's similar to someone like Bishop. It's just that it's so much in the unspoken and so much in the way the light is, the way the shadow is, perspective.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that I'm so interested in is this, I wish, we'd had time to kind of think through this in the film, is this idea of the second person. Like she's telling us things that are very personal often, but sometimes she's doing it in the second person, right? And I think some of her most popular poems, right? This, you do not have to be good, or what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? The way that she's inviting the reader in, and it's just this very gentle, compassionate, but still, not saccharine, real form of address. Yeah, never patronizing. And it reminds me of the line that Ariana says early in the film, this idea of the poem is a wayfaring stranger. That the poem is going to come into our lives and we don't know where it's going to take us. And so much of that is constructed through that kind of address,
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, will you show us a little more film? Do people want to see some more film? Yeah. Okay,
so the next clip I'm going to set you up, Gabby. This is where you and I are talking in particular, and this is maybe something we can talk about. This is sort of like Mary and teaching, and Mary's reception within within the poetry establishment. So this is, I think, about
I want to say we've got someone in the chat, Faye, who's talked about Mary as their first teacher.
Oh, wow.
Which is so cool. Hi, Faye. All right.
Okay, so let me see if I can, let me go back to my sharing. Okay, I got it. Okay, gotta fast forward a little tiny, no. Sorry. It didn't leave off where I left it.
We're just like in bliss watching this. It's totally cool.
The conundrum with poetry is that sometimes when you gain the people, you can lose the poets.
I was having a conversation with some poets about Mary Oliver some years ago now, and one of them said, if you've read one Mary Oliver poem, you've read them all, which was a wild statement to me. That felt like a perfect kind of dismissal. For some people, that simplicity is suspicious, but also so many of us know we can't do it.
I think at a certain point I was like, okay, I want to see more with Mary. Like I really did want to see more. And also knowing a little more about her, I'm like, I know there's a lot more to her life other than just waking up in the morning and going out for a walk. I'm like, what is the storm? But again, like I haven't read all her work. I read a lot at the beginning, and then I was like, okay, I get this, I'm getting a little critical now.
I was shocked researching that New Yorker piece. I was shocked to discover that Mary Oliver had never received a full-length book review in the New York Times. And that struck me as such an indication of the ridiculously low level of respect that she was getting from the poetry establishment.
It's not just that people said, oh, her poems aren't good. It was like teaching a student a Mary Oliver poem would like somehow ruin poetry, because like then people might start writing like Mary Oliver. First of all, you wish, like try it.
On the surface, it looks awful easy what she was doing, but it's not easy. She's going to the deepest, most contradictory places where life and death usher from the same source. And then she's speaking with clear language about that mystery.
The first fish I ever caught would not lie down quiet in the pail, but flailed and sucked at the burning amazement of the air, and died in the slow pouring off of rainbows. Later, I opened his body and separated the flesh from the bones and ate him.
I
Now
love
the
that
sea
part of the
is
film.
in me.
I like the whole
I
film,
am the fish.
of course, but
the fish glitters in
yeah,
me.
I love this.
We are
Will you
risen,
talk a little
tangled
bit
together,
about
certain to fall back to the
this
sea.
idea of Mary and
Out of
reception,
pain
Mary and
pain
respect,
and more pain.
what we even
feed this
mean by like
feverish
a
plot.
good poet,
We are
that
nourished
kind of thing.
by the
But
mystery.
I mean, it must have been fascinating for you talking to people about Mary Oliver. Were there people who didn't want to talk
think
to
of
you?
her-
How did you? Even that moment with Nick Flynn, like that moment of criticism of Nick. I mean, I'd be fascinated to know like just what it was like getting people to talk to you, all of that. Oh, you're muted.
I think, I think one of my challenges as a filmmaker is I can really just nerd out on stuff. Like I can get really into the nitty gritty and really passionate about it. And I think that's great for me, but it's not maybe necessarily where like a general audience wants to go, right? So there wasn't in the early research sort of thinking about some of these distinctions between popular poetry and let's say the language poets. Like I'm really interested in that conversation, but that's like a very esoteric conversation for I think a general audience. And I think for Mary, who is a poet about whom people say, well, she's a poet for people who don't necessarily read poetry. I didn't want to, I had to really force myself not to get into the nitty gritty of poetry too much, but to keep it, I wanted it to be smart and engaging, but maybe in a way that people wouldn't feel like, oh, it's getting a little too, like inside baseball, right? And so, so the interview, Gabby, how long did we talk when I interviewed
you? Talked for hours.
They were all like that. I had these incredible
Someday the B-reel will be
interviews.
shown and my career will be over.
I mean, no. You always had great gravitas throughout the entire interview. I mean, we like all of the interviews were like this. They were so wonderful and just far ranging in all these different directions. And they were 2-3 hours long. And then just to kind of get it, distill it down to the core key components of what was needed for a particular part of the film, that was definitely a huge challenge. And I think I actually said this, I was like, did I say this already? I just did a screening of the film. I'm at the Athens International Film Festival in Ohio, and at the Q&A I said this, but I think one of the things that was a challenge in regard to this idea of popularity and also this kind of resurgence, I think that really did happen during the pandemic, where Mary's poems were circulating quite a bit and people were making TikToks of themselves reading her poetry. I mean, there's a lot of those. I use a few of them in the film. Was trying to convey popularity, but also this embrace of her by a younger generation and what she means to young people, but without defaulting to the aesthetic of the internet. Because I feel like that aesthetic of the internet and Instagram is like in our face so much. I didn't want to reproduce it. So I use a little few TikToks because they're funny and sweet. But then I also found these students who had written letters to Mary when they were in 8th grade. And then I find them and they're now in college and they read these letters, little snippets from these letters for us as a way to try and think about just how to get across how she's touching so many different people at so many different times in their lives.
Can you talk a little bit about, I don't know if I bet people are interested in this. I really am. I mean, this is a film that's going to be in theaters, but it's also going to be on American Masters. So like one of the things we're interested in when we talk about poems, right, is form and vessel. And so you are there's a vessel to American Masters and how that works. And then there's also this other kind of idea of just like making a film, thinking about her.
Sure.
I was wondering, like thinking about nerding out, like how did you think about who to talk to? How did you get funding? Like, just how does the vessel get made? And then, like any kind of form, I mean, one of the ways Mary can be misread is people say, "Oh, there's no craft there." Like, what? I mean, like that's crazy. There's such. I mean, her poems only work because the sentences are so extraordinary, and the syntax and the way the lines are breaking is so astonishing. Could you talk a little bit about the vessel? How did you pick people? How did the money come? Those kinds of things I think we're really all interested in.
Well, so one thing that's interesting about the vessel is that, public television, it's blocks of time, right? So there's a 2-hour block and there's a 90-minute block, and the Mary Oliver film is in a 90-minute block, but that means that the broadcast version is only 81 minutes. And that was just more heartbreak than I could bear. So I had to fight very hard to make a 10-minute longer version, a 91-minute version. So the theatrical and festival and hopefully streaming version, down the road streaming version, will be the 91-minute film. I actually, it could have gone to 95, but we compromised at 91. And then broadcast were just contained by the time slot. So it's 81, so I had to pull some things out. The funding came from American Masters and WNET. It came largely from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And so that was a challenge because we did have
Well,
some
Sasha, could you lift your mic a little bit? People are asking a little bit. It's hitting your necklace.
Oh, that's so weird. Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So we got funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and then we lost some of that funding, and so that was a real challenge. We were able to get some portion of it back, a pretty good portion of it back, but that was really due to like just the incredible support and perseverance of WNET, which is the public television station in New York that houses American Masters, and the whole American Masters team. And then we had this great external producer, John Keith, who came in as just a Mary Oliver fan who supported the film. And so that was kind of how the funding piece came together. In terms of who I interviewed, Lindsay Whalen, who's on here. Hi, Lindsay. She, of course, was one of the first people I interviewed, and she connected me with so many people. I'm trying to remember.
Tell us about Lindsay Whalen. Hi, Lindsay Whalen.
Hi, Lindsay. Lindsay was like, beyond like a wealth of information. I can't wait for her biography to come out.
For folks who don't know, Lindsay Whalen is in the room, and Lindsay Whalen is the biographer of Mary Oliver. Lindsay, when's the book coming out? Lindsay might be in
She says she's hiding. She says she's hiding from small children.
Yeah. Anyway, for folks who are here,
so the book is
really
coming out.
great.
It's going to be a totally incredible book because she literally knows everything. She knew Mary. I didn't know Mary. I started on this film in 2023, but Lindsay knew Mary and did interviews with her and spent time with her down in Florida. So she really is the expert. And so Lindsay is the person who connected me with David Keplinger, with Frank Gaspar. I feel like Lindsay actually is the person who told me that you knew Mary, Gabby. But
it might have been Mark Doty.
It might have been Mark Doty. Yeah,
or
I don't think it
either,
might have been
but
Mark Doty. Because I also was looking for a lot of those Provincetown connections, because even though Mary, for people who don't know, there's the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown. It's just this incredible space that's existed for more than 50 years, supports artists and writers. And she's not necessarily known as, she didn't teach there, but she worked there as a secretary in the early years, and she was involved, she was on the selection committee, I think, especially for poets. And so I feel like there's this Mary poetry DNA that's kind of threaded through a lot of the poets who went through the Fine Arts Work Center, like you, like Ada Limon, like Major Jackson. So people who had that, like Nick Flynn, had that Provincetown connection. Then there were other people who I just heard interviewed, and I thought,
like having Ariana Reigns is like really brilliant.
Ariana is someone who I had been at McDowell with in 2017, and she just was on my radar, and I think I see her on Instagram, and I thought, I bet she'd be a really great person to have a conversation with. You know, it was really instinctual. Danica Kelly came to Richmond and gave a reading. And it was the same thing. I just thought, and I bought her book, and I thought, I really just want to sit down and talk with her about Mary Oliver.
Yeah.
So some of it was just that kind of following my gut.
Did American Masters approach you about this first, or were you just like making a film about Mary Oliver?
So I was working on a different film with American Masters about a visual artist named Ruth Asawa.
Ruth Asawa?
Yeah.
My favorite. You didn't know yet?
No, someone needs to make a Ruth Asawa film. I don't know if it's going to be me, but the Ruth Asawa film got put on ice. And so we were figuring out what are we going to do, and had a bunch of different things in the hopper. And then the Mary Oliver film sort of came up organically, in part because actually when the executive producer of American Masters, we hadn't talked in maybe a couple of months, he texted me and said, are you free to talk? And I thought, maybe he's calling about Ruth Asawa, maybe we're back on. And he called me, and I picked up the phone, and his very first question was, how do you feel about dogs? And I grew up in New York City, so I'm not like a giant dog person, to be honest. I know people are probably like, oh my God, how could a non-dog person make the Mary Oliver film? It's blasphemy. But luckily for me, I said, who doesn't love dogs? And this part was true. I have been collecting footage of dogs for years.
The Sasha thing.
I'm hearing someone. I have been collecting Super 8mm and 16mm home movies of dogs for like a decade. So I told him that. I said, I have all this dog footage. I'm up to my eyeballs in dogs. Like, let's do it. And I can finally figure out what I'm doing with this dog footage. So, came together.
So, I mean, I love the way it all comes together. Were there people who, and then hopefully we have time for one more clip. The Notebooks people can tell us if we do, but were there people who you approached who didn't want to talk about her?
You know, there weren't people who didn't want to talk about her. I do feel like the film, I did not get to interview a Native American poet, and that felt really important, and I just couldn't make it happen. I asked a few different people, and just between scheduling and people being too busy, it didn't work out. And then the other person who I didn't ask, but I wanted to, but also at a certain point, like if it's the 6-hour Netflix version where we just could keep going endlessly, I just started to feel like it was getting crowded and I couldn't continue to interview people. But I did really want to interview Hanif Abdurraqib just about Ohio and writers from Ohio, but I ran out of time.
Will people be able to see the longer version, like on Apple or something?
Yeah, eventually that will be the streaming version.
Okay. That's awesome. That's awesome. How much more time do we have? Can we watch one last clip?
Yeah, we have about 30 minutes left.
Okay.
So if you want to watch another clip and then maybe do some reading.
Yeah, and then we'll do some Q&A. Okay. Awesome.
I'll do the clip with wild geese. And then I think it goes. Yeah, it's the clip with wild geese and also with the dogs. I'm like, am I remembering it right? Okay, I think I am.
I also love that Percy is getting love in the chat.
I mean, I didn't do a dog poem, which is kind of tragic, but that's that. Okay, let me see. Okay, wild geese some more.
As I was leaving, she kind of blew kisses and said, I love you and goodbye. But the last thing that she said was, no moping. No moping. To me, you could look at every poem that she's written and say, is the underlying message here no moping? Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, everything is happening. Meanwhile, the wild geese.
You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
You can read it 100 times and hear it differently every time. Who is the you, and what does good even mean?
It's a wild goose. It's the wild geese. We think of wild as chaotic, but wild is harmonious with the wilderness, which is where we all came from. We're born wild.
I think people feel a lot of pressure to be good by external metrics. One of the things she learned by being dedicated to nature was that that question doesn't follow deer and it doesn't follow bees. Why are we putting this on ourselves?
How many people here love dogs? Yay! Yay! Aren't they something? Who needs language?
What I get from her poetry is a sense that you belong here in this world. And the evidence is how you are compelled by the beauty of it. That beauty of the world is an accusation that you are withholding your own beauty by being good, as opposed to being yourself.
Mary kept finding the light and realizing she did not have to be good. You could not contain her any more than you could contain the season outside. The cycle continues.
Yeah, sorry, that's because I made these clips originally for another event. So you can see that's from my massive dog archive. That dog section was originally 4 minutes long, and I was really committed to just playing it out, but I did have to cut it down eventually.
It's really powerful, though, to watch all these different people and people's different reactions to that poem. That talk about a poem that we all meet at different times of our life in different ways, and again, like this reticence, and that you do not have to be good also means different things to different people, right? And what, this incredible moment in that poem, you do not have to walk on your knees, right? People sort of focus on you do not have to be good, but that you do not have to walk on your knees, line break, for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body break, love what it loves, right? I mean, it's really, really the kind of physicality of the poem right there, the discomfort in that poem that we go through, and how we get to that soft body, that soft animal. It's really, really powerful. I love that section. Somebody said before, maybe I'll read a couple poems.
Yes, please do.
There's something about like that and that moment and what's being talked about, that sort of goodness, and also how that poem brings up loneliness again, right? Which is also a theme that like comes up again and again in the poems, and something that that's really, really powerful for me. I think I'll read a couple little miss you poems, maybe, because even though people might say, oh, there's other poems that you write that make me think of Mary, these are poems that actually really
I'm glad you're going to read the miss you poems, because I'm interested in the way you use you in the second person, and how it's so, the address is so personal. But like the first time I heard you read one of those poems, it was so personal to me because of the way it reminded me of someone who I missed. Anyway, so
Yeah,
that's
no,
perfect.
absolutely. And because my understanding of Mary, and I think that's true for many of us, really also it is absolutely linked with the 90s and it's absolutely linked with Provincetown. There's a lot of complicated discussion around Mary and the way Mary doesn't sort of talk openly in certain kinds of ways about AIDS and Provincetown. But Mary is intricately linked to that time for me, and I think that there's no separation between my understanding of Mary and Mary's poetics and elegy, and so she's also someone who really helped me think about elegy. Miss you. Would like to grab that chilled tofu that we love. This is for my friend, the great Kiowa scholar Jenny Tonpahot, who we lost in 2020. Do not care if you only bring your light body. Would just be so happy to sit at the table and talk about the menu. Miss you. Wish we could bet which chilies they'll put on the cubes of tofu, our favorite. Sometimes green, sometimes red, roasted we always thought, but so cold and fresh. How did they do it? Wish you could be here to talk about it like it was so important. Wish you could. Watched you on the screens as I was walking, as I was cooking. Wished you could get out of the hospital. Can't bring myself to order our dish and eat it in the car. Miss you laughing, miss you coming in from the cold, and one too many meetings, laughing. I'll order already, I'll order 7 helpings, some dumplings, those cold yam noodles that you like. You can come in your light body or skeleton or be invisible. I don't even care. No, you have a long way to travel. No, I don't even know whether it's long at all. Wish you could tell me what you're reading. If you're reading, miss you. I'm at the table in the back. Miss you. Would like to take a walk with you. I want to say as I'm doing this, and I'm going to read like a few of these, and then I know it's going to be time for questions. What I also realize is Mary Oliver helped me speak clearly and write sentences in a certain way, like syntactically. Miss you. Would like to take a walk with you. Do not care if you arrive in just your skeleton. Would love to take a walk with you. Miss you. Would love to make you shrimp saganaki like you used to make me when you were alive. Love to feed you, sit over steaming bowls of pilaf, little roasted tomatoes covered in pepper and nutmeg. Miss you. Would love to walk to the post office with you, bring the ghost dog. We'll walk past the waterfall, and you can tell me about the after. Wish you would come back for a while. Don't even need to bring your skin sack. I'll know you. I know you will know me, even though I'm bigger now. Grayer. I'll show you my garden. I'd like to hop in the leaf pile you raked, but if you want to jump in, I'll rake it for you. Miss you, standing looking out at the river with your rake in your hand. Miss you in your puffy blue jacket. They're hip now. I can bring you a new one if you'll only come by. No, I told you it was okay to leave me. Why'd you believe me? You always believed me. Wish you would come back so we could talk about truth. Miss you. Wish you would walk through my door. Stand out from the mirror. Come through the pipes. And if we have time, I'll read one more because one of the things Mary and there was a period of time where I spent quite a bit of time with Mary. And Mary sent me a baseball that said Go Sox on it because we both loved the Red Sox a lot. Mary Oliver and the Red Sox.
This is not good for me. I grew up in New York hating the Red Sox. I just have to.
Well, it's a good thing Mary's not here to hear you say it.
No, I know.
Every day but Sunday. I like how the crowd swayed And the layered greens, how they welcomed me, reminded me of the best parts of childhood, like how the stadium smelled, peanuts roasted with honey all over, beer, hot dogs, a bathroom somewhere in the distance. It sounds gross, but it was a sweetness. People brought blankets, including Jill and Tim, who called my name as I was looking around for them. I wish I could afford every day game there is. But today was a jewel, even if it's the last time. All the kids on the Jumbotron, seeing themselves and jumping like crazy, the feel of the cold air. 43, but felt like 36, all of us shivering together, giddy with it. Rain that was a little thicker, almost snow, against my face as we walked back along the river. Listening to the crews row past, cutting the water and the shush, shush, shush of the oars, but thicker, almost like a thresher through the wheat. And over the bridge down the street into the pizza place, tang of garlic and tomato in the back of my throat just from the smell of it. I missed you. I wish you were here.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that Mary also taught me how to do is like love my partner, Angeline, for my whole life. And that's a poem that's about going to see the Red Sox with my pal Jill Lepore and her husband Tim, like on sort of a rainy, snowy day where they ended up playing, but also being away from home and wishing I was with Angeline. And this film talks really beautifully about the other relationships in Mary's life, later in her life with Anne, but the great love was Molly, and I think Mary also taught, I'm sure, like people who were in other kinds of marriages, but for me, as a lesbian, as a non-binary person, that relationship was profound for me to see. Yeah. And her love of life.
I think it was, there was a version of the film where we did not include, people haven't seen it, so Mary had a partner after Molly passed away, her partner Anne, and that relationship was complicated, and I think most of her friends didn't really like to talk about it too much. I think generally people thought it was not a very good or healthy relationship for Mary, although Mary seemed to be quite happy and committed in it, so it's complicated. But we weren't sure if we were going to include Anne, and I thought it was very important because I thought, yes, Molly is this great love and she's with her for 40 plus years, but I also think she was a person, who strikes me, who cared so much about love and passion for her entire life. And I think we don't see that represented for women, older women, queer or straight,
sensuous
very
pleasure
often.
Of watching Mary Oliver, which I did, not in any kind of way that was inappropriate, but I spent time in hotel rooms with Mary in her pajamas, like drinking a Budweiser and smoking cigarettes, like after a reading. Like Mary was a person who took a lot of pleasure in the world, and like an earthy pleasure. And yeah, like there's the fox and those things are really sacred, and like the beach forest and stuff. But there's also like listening to the Red Sox and drinking a beer and wearing a skull cap and an ACT UP t-shirt and your pajama pants and being with like whatever it was, like being with another person, like opening yourself to other experience. Yeah, very powerful. I see that our hosts are here, which probably means it's question time. May I just say though, Sasha, I think I don't know if I speak for everybody here, but like I am so excited for this film. Like it's it's a huge deal.
Thank you.
So excited. I think I wanted to start with this first question that we have about whether either, this is for Sasha or Gabby, if you have anything to say about Mary's notebook and composition practices. My understanding, she wrote long form in notebooks while walking through nature, and this person is interested in to think of how that informed the structure of the syntax and the poems themselves.
Hi, dear. Sasha, you really were dealing with her papers and stuff, so it's really cool.
Yeah, I will say, so when you'll, do you see it? Oh yeah, well, no, not anything you saw. No, so in her archive, which was not an archive when I got it. It's now at the Library of Congress. Lindsay had it, and then I had it in these kind of stages. It's just boxes and boxes, and it's organized boxes, but it's not organized like the way the Library of Congress will organize it. There are these little brown notebooks that she took notes in, and so there are those, but she did not leave behind work in progress. She didn't leave behind poems in progress or unfinished poems or manuscripts really of any kind, which I think is pretty unusual for a writer. So it's hard to speak to that because we can't necessarily look at, she tells us in interviews in multiple different places that she might write and rewrite a poem 40 times. But versions 1 through 39 of Wild Geese, we're not seeing those. They don't exist for us. So I think that's a really interesting choice for a writer to make. I think, I'd be interested to hear from Lindsay if it's frustrating, in some ways, because for me, that was, again, maybe kind of an inside baseball thing. I probably couldn't have gone down that path anyway, but it also helped me to kind of think about, what Mary left behind. I feel like whatever she left behind, she knew we were going to find. So there are things in the film that people might be like, you included that in the film, huh? But she left it and we found it, and so it's there. There are other things that, if John Waters says near the end of the film, if there were things she didn't want me to tell you, I wouldn't have told you.
Yeah, and Maria Shriver says that too.
Yeah, and I think that's really true, that her friends are protective of her, and that she knows that there are going to be these black holes in any biography.
Lindsay is here. I don't want to, but you had said if Lindsay has anything to say. Lindsay, if you want to say anything about notebooks or anything, and you want to come in, that's thrilling. It's also fine if you don't want to, but I don't know if Lindsay's still here. The book is going to be unbelievable. Hey, I'm here. Hey, Lindsay, do you want to say anything about notebooks or that kind of thing? That question, you would, as Sasha say, be able to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Lindsay Whalen, biographer of Mary Oliver. What a night this is.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I am sitting in the dark outside of my house because my wily children are trying to go to bed inside. So that's why I'm not on video right now. But I would say, I'm remembering a Mary quote just to speak to drafts. I'm not remembering where this is from. It might be from I think it actually is published and not from an interview. But she said something like, "Who wants to see a bird almost fly?" About drafts. And I really feel no grief about not having the drafts. There are very few, but there are some places where I can see her working through something in longhand on a draft. I don't feel a grief about it because I think it's one of the sacred spaces of her life, one of the protected privacies, like any spiritual aspect of her life, like romantic love, like spirituality, really, like all of there's just places where she chose to be silent so that she could be as verbose as she was in the published work. I truly believe that her elective silence allowed her to be as truly prolific as she was. And that's not always true in every life. I think in her life that was a truth, and that helped. I also, it's very dear to me the way that she talked about her journal work, which she often called scribbling. Again, I think that very humble word is a very intentional word. That you're just, sure, she was, the romantic story is true, the pencils in the beach forest and whatever else, but it was also, a post-it or the back of an envelope at a stop sign, waiting at a stop sign or anything else. And very much what you're seeing in terms of what remains in the journals is not what we would call diaristic work at all. That's just not the bent that mind took. Very much what you're seeing is a lot of This is the first songbird I saw, and like maybe we'll get a date. She told me this is so funny, where she's like, oh yeah, in one of the notebooks you're going to see the word woof exclamation point. And that was the first time I saw a coyote in Provincetown. So that was, that kind of notational way of working was how she worked. And yeah, sure, every once in a while you'll stumble upon a recognizable phrase. I also think for anybody who's interested in those notebooks, that you might be familiar with a form she called the sand dabs, where she's they really appear in later collections, like in the essay collections or the mixed poetry essay collections that happened like in the 90s or early 2000s, where it's she called them sand dabs, but they are really just kind of like the more aphoristic ponderings that occur in the notebooks. Yeah, I think I think one of the things that you have to almost, Sasha, I would be interested to see like if you agree with this, like when you are first, if you have ever spent time in another archive, spending time in Mary Oliver's archive can at first feel like it's full of absences, and that but so much of what I've really had to do in the very long time that I've taken to work on this project is I just see everything completely differently. I have to totally unlearn. And, all of these, like everything that's not there says as much as everything that is there. And it's just it's a very particular life. It's closer in some ways to how we think of like a life of a saint, or like it's a life of total dedication and devotion and humanness, not like a saint in the truest understanding, that it's like a complicated, very human, and also very divine life.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for
Thanks, guys. I'm so
here.
happy to be here.
This is so cool.
I think this question is kind of from me, but and it's for Gabby. I was curious if you would talk about the potlucks and where you got that idea from that, and what are you seeking to do with them? Because I think it's so wonderful, and just love to hear you talk about it.
Well, I have this new book that's come out, The New Economy, and it comes time I spend quite a bit of time anyway, going and giving readings, talking, being around people. But when it came to talk about like how do I want to be in the world with this book, what I really realized is I wanted to be in conversation with people, and it was a time where I wanted every size group, whether it was 9 people or 175 people, I wanted to figure out like how can we feel close, and how can it feel sacred, and how can it feel collaborative. And so I just said, my remarkable Vaughn Fielder, who is just a collaborator with me in events and stuff like that, and booking. I said, well, what if we ask people if they want to have potlucks? And we didn't know if like anyone would say yes, but the truth is like everybody said, like NYU is having a potluck on Thursday. And so it's been the most remarkable thing. I mean, everybody does a potluck differently. Karis Books, it was like this beautiful, smaller potluck with like, wonderful younger people, all kinds of people bringing like their spanakopita and their, vegetarian lasagna. And we're talking about experience. We're talking about our lives as non-binary and trans people. And we're in that. Then there are these like larger things where like Goodyear Arts in Charlotte or Miami just like did this enormous, beautiful potluck where I was paired with this group called the Freedom Project, which is thinking about how we bring civics and discussion of climate change throughout the city of Miami to people in all different neighborhoods. if anyone's in Brattleboro, May 2nd, Jill Lepore and I, my dear pal, are going to do one in Brattleboro, and we're going to talk about what it is to be writers, but also what it is to be in this country in this moment. It has been one of like the greatest things in my life, and part of it is like I just grew up in a little town with my grandparents for a good portion of my early childhood, and like we had church suppers, and the whole town would have dinner together 4 times a year, and one time a year it would be my grandparents. And I think this is a time, every time is this time, but this is a time where what it is to sit at a table with someone and find out, yeah, like I can read my poem to you, but like I'm not the star of anything. Like we both have a story to tell, and like you're going to tell me about your grandmother's spanakopita, and I'm going to tell you about like this poem that I wrote, and then we're going to learn about each other. And I think we are in the middle of this horrifying regime where one of the things that I think people are trying to say, I mean, look at Sasha having lost a ton of her funding. Like there's an administration that is trying to say to us that we are not curious, we don't care about each other, we have nothing to say to each other, and we certainly aren't interested in feeding each other, housing each other, or keeping each other safe from harm. And that I just don't believe that's true. And so the Pollocks are a place where we can do that kind of work together. And it's moving, whether it's in a huge city or whether it's in like a tiny town in North Carolina. And I'm sort of coming to the end to one part of them, but people have started asking, like today someone said, would I want to do one in Washington, D.C.? And I'm very interested in how we can keep forming these and making them. It's been like one of the greatest gifts of my life to get to do these. This feels like that. Also, come to the potluck at NYU if you're in New York at 7 p.m. on Thursday, or come and see me and Jill Lepore hang out.
Oh my gosh, that sounds. I mean, sorry, I'm a little teary. Lisa, do we have any more questions?
We did have one other. We only have a couple of minutes left, but this question, did either of you have moments when you were kind of overtaken in the best way, even if it was a little painful, by the poetry, by everything while working on the film?
I mean, I feel, yes. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I've probably watched that Mary reading Wild Geese 100 or more times. And watching it with an audience is really special, like in a darkened room, because you really can just hear a pin drop. But you know, it's the poems, but it's also the way that people feel about her. I think, like at the very end of the film, there's a story that her younger friend David Keplinger tells about her life, and the way that Maria Shriver, I mean, the way that her friends and people who knew her talk about her is just, it's very, very moving. You really get a sense of what an incredibly special person she was, and her tremendous impact on the people who knew her. So as someone who didn't know her, I feel like we're so lucky to have the poems, but it's also, I think, that that emotional, you know, just sort of feeling that you get from getting to spend time with people who knew her in the film, I think is something that's really important to it as well.
It's something that that's something to me that nobody has done. I mean, Sasha, that's one of the ways to me the film is really, really radical, is that you show, like, you show people who really knew her and really loved her, and or were her neighbors, or, I mean, that to me is so important. Like, she did not live in a vacuum. It's powerful for poets to see that.
Thank you for that. We're gonna I think we're going to go ahead and close out. So I want to thank Gabby and Sasha for spending this time with us tonight. I know that it did a lot for my heart, and I hope it did for everybody else's. I put some links in the chat. It is a shameless plug to please follow us and sign up for our newsletter. We do this once a month. We have amazing poets and creatives that come and join us. We would love to see you again. The last thing that I'm going to ask is if you would like to unmute and hoot and holler or say something to Gabby and Sasha, you are welcome to do that. Thank you for being here.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Bye, friends.
Thank you.
What an amazing
Bye, y'all.
night.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
Just beautiful.
Sasha.
Thank
and
you.
thank
Oh,
you
thank
so
you so
much to the
much.
Notebooks Collective.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for inviting us. This was
Long live the
amazing.
Notebooks Collective.
Thank
you.
So great.
Thank you.
Yoo-hoo. Thank you.
What's your next? Who's your next group again? Tell us again the date.
Octavio Quintanilla and Catherine D. Old Mixon, and it is on May 19th?
No, 12th.
12th.
May 12th. But they're both
12th.
poets and visual artists, so it's going to be really amazing to see how, Octavio's been doing frontotexto, I think is what it's called, like these visual painting or these paintings with poems. So we're really looking forward to that.
One of the coolest things is we reach out to past guests and say, who do you think should be a guest? And these people were put together by Marcella Shulock, who was here before. And I think there's a special serendipity in that I'm really excited about.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you,
awesome.
everybody. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.
You.
Take care.